You are listening to the Cattle Call Podcast. This is the place where computer-aided design and drafting meets humor and practicality, with a touch of business acumen thrown in for fun. Jim and Rocco, the owners of Zentech Consultants, the premier U.S. technology consulting firm for architecture, engineering, construction, and manufacturing, discuss the fascinating world of CAD with some humor and some honesty. The Cattle Call Podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of the Cattle Call Podcast with Jim and Rocco from Zentech Consultants. I am your host, Jim Coppinger, and with me, as always, is my partner in business and crime and general hijinks, Rocco Parisi. Say hi to the nice people, Rocco.
What kind of crime do we commit?
Shh, but you can't admit to it on air, dude. Come on. You are the worst criminal I know. You're just terrible at this. So, that's all right. Luckily, we have a guest in here today who will actually work with me. So we have a special guest in today to talk about our topic. We have Mr. Matt DeBasio, who has come back again. Matt's an estimator, construction technologist, and our favorite digital anarchist. He's here with us today. And Matt works for Agnes Construction Management, and he is silly enough to talk to us about today's topic, despite having suffered through being a guest on our podcast before. So, Matt, thanks for being here yet again.
Jim, Rocco, thanks for having me again.
Welcome back.
Outstanding. So today, this topic we're going to be talking about today is structuring design output for real-world constructability. And man, that sounds like a really professional level topic, right? It's like we're moving up in the world now. Nice. So, all right. So let's start with Matt. So Matt, why don't you tell our listeners about what you do over at Agnes, and in particular, how does that relate to this topic today about constructability? Where does that tie into your daily job?
Well, as I've described in the past, as far as what I do here, I'm really sort of an 80-20 split between estimating and pre-construction and the technology side of things. So for that first 80% of the time spent in pre-con, constructability is a big part of what we do there. Preliminary review of documents and sort of building the project in our heads, where we really have to fill in the gaps between what's documented and what needs to happen in real time.
Right.
Sort of how to get from point A to point B, the design on paper or digital 3D model, to an actual built environment. So the means and methods for construction as extrapolated from the design, and then of course for estimating purposes, how much that's going to cost and how long it's going to take.
Okay.
But then on the 20% technology time spent, I'm always thinking about how to get from that point A to point B faster and more efficiently, or at least more accurately. So looking at the documents themselves is really the first place. Their format, their content, and what we can do to digest the information a little bit easier.
Okay. That's a good description. I think that's a great intro into where we're trying to go here today, which is looking at those documents and kind of talking about what is it that that end user, right? Folks like Matt, who are actually going to be in charge of handling the construction end, what do they need? How do we make their lives easier? How do we make a better product? So, so I think the idea of quote unquote, real world constructability, I think that's a big topic. So I kind of wanted to start off here with my own, albeit limited thoughts on what that means, right? So, in my work here at Zentech, I do spend a lot of my time working with construction folks like Matt and helping them with their design, their communication tools, particularly as it relates to construction documentation. That's a big thing, right? So the biggest way that most of the folks in the construction world are consuming their design information is via the ubiquitous PDF file. It doesn't matter, right? If these guys are using Bluebeam, or if you're using Adobe or Procore, if you're maybe opening your PDFs in a web browser, right? The bulk of modern construction data is communicated using the good old portable document format we've all been using for decades. And the issue that I see most often with my clients is that the data being shown in the PDFs, it isn't always the data that they need to actually build that design. Even when it's showing the correct objects, right? A lot of times, the detailing and the referencing may not be sufficient to the needs of the contractors. which can lead to a lot of RFIs and email chains bouncing back and forth from the GC to the designer to the trades and back. So that's kind of how I see it. But Matt, you're actually the one who suggested today's topic. So what's your definition of real world constructability? And am I even talking about the same thing that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think we are talking about the same thing, and I was the one that sort of posed this as an idea for a topic, although you did a much better job on the title, I must say.
Hey, listen, I got to earn my pay somehow.
But yeah, the title, as Rocco pointed out, it's a great title, and it sounds fancy for a pretty simple concept. And I think the topic at hand is really divided into two fronts, right? The constructability, the getting from design to building, but also the starting point with point A, the design, and how that info is delivered to us contractors. Mm-hmm. As you mentioned, the PDF, right? That's probably how 95% of all of our information is now distributed and consumed. And the content or format of those PDFs that we receive on projects has now become sort of the battleground for the initiative to make things better or easier in the industry, or at least I think that's a great starting point. A lot of the constructability issues on the contractor side fall within what we'll call gray areas between disciplines, right? Architecture, structural, MEP, designers not coordinating well, or sometimes not communicating at all. Also, to a lesser extent or a greater extent, depending on which way you look at it, where dissimilar materials tend to meet each other in the physical build. Mm-hmm. So we have metal panels and brick, glass. Those areas will usually get estimators and PMs scratching their heads when we're reviewing drawings. You had mentioned details and references or call-outs, and that's a great example where even with some of the 3D authoring tools we have now, like Revit, that are supposed to foolproof those references back and forth between each other and between sheets, we still see incorrect callouts, views that don't line up with the callouts, tags that are pointing to sheets that may or may not even exist, elevation sections, details that have clearly been recycled from other projects and now don't make sense in the context of what we're working on today. Now, I'm a big fan of hacks or cheats, right? The little tips and tricks that we all find to make our lives easier and allow you to work faster. But knowing that this happens all the time in construction documentation, at what point can we say that there needs to be a responsibility on the producers of the information to check that stuff rather than the consumers to find all the inaccuracies?
Yeah.
You mentioned RFIs and email chains bouncing back and forth. I'm sure that designers don't like fielding and answering RFIs any more than we like spending time uncovering these things and writing them all out.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think you're absolutely dead on. And I think there's a large portion of that comes into the concept of automation, right? And maybe me and Rocco may be part of the problem here. That when you're a software reseller and a consultant, you do want people to use the new automated process, whether it's the new BIM package or a new CED or whatever you have going on here, that automates the processes and makes it faster and easier and simpler. But I think what happens is that a lot of times people say, oh, I have, I push a button, it generates the details, I can go home now, and no one's taking the time to say, look, I still need to verify that it did it correctly. Just because it did it quickly doesn't mean it did it right. Right? And I think that's where a lot of that comes into play.
You are absolutely right, Jim. And you kind of split today's world into two facets. We have the technology tools, which you admittedly you're a software reseller, so you guys have a vested interest in pushing product and getting the tools in our hands as customers. But the process, you can have the most advanced tool in the world, but if you don't know how to use it, or if you take shortcuts and liberties with what that tool is offering you, then that's no good for anybody. You still have to do the work. There is no easy button, no matter how advanced the technology is.
And I think that's great. And that's actually one of the things that we do try and focus on for that reason. is that whatever software we sell or do, we offer both training and ongoing support for it. We don't just sell and walk away, because you have to have some kind of a training and support system to make sure people are using it correctly. So I think that's a real important point you bring up there. So all right, so constructability in project management is an important concept, but honestly, I think it's one that is really understated here in the U.S. in particular. I think they do a better job of this in Europe. I think it tends to get absorbed under kind of a real wide umbrella of, as I talk to people, I say, well, we know what we're doing. They understand. We've been doing it for 30 years. So, companies, they tend to avoid formally defining a constructability process, right? And what the concerns are they need to address on every job. And I think that's really a big mistake, both on the design side and on the construction side. Listen, as I kind of think about this, right, there are three key ingredients I think you need to address when you're looking for constructability. The first one, number one, is you have to make the construction process as simple as you can. Make it easy, right? Number two, you need to coordinate the skills of your team to avoid problems. You've got people with skills inside. Don't just dump everything on one guy and say, well, that's his job. You got to find a way to bring experts onto every job. And I think which leads to my third and final here, right? Which is that you have to integrate smooth communication workflows to help speed up the construction, right? I can have the best experts and I can have a simple process, but if I can't communicate that to you, right, as the end user in this process, Matt, then it ain't going to do anybody any good. I'm sure there are other things, but those three to me seem to kind of sum up constructability. So, Matt, what are the key components of a constructability process from the project management and fieldwork standpoints? What do you, in particular, right, in your company, what do you guys need that's often missing from the project design?
I think you did a great job of summing it up, Jim. And there was a few really good points in there. So there's a lot to unpack. Let me try to back up. First off, you had mentioned the United States versus other markets, particularly Europe. I think we could probably learn a lot from studying process and workflow in other markets. You also mentioned, avoiding the definition of a formal process, and I'll admit that we, where I'm at, we might not have a formally defined process, but we do tend to follow a certain practice, right? Mm-hmm. So like the order of operations that we learned in mathematics, there's a certain sequence in constructability review and by extension, trade coordination. Structure first, since that can't move, then building envelope, because the most risk is within moisture permeability of the exterior skin, then the overall building program for its stated business use case to make sure it meets the requirements, then major services incoming to the building, pitched pipe, huge duct, and so on and so on. Right. So I think your three kind of main points, you were spot on. Those would be the objectives or the goals of that constructability review process. So let's look at each of those ingredients sort of independently, right? First, making the process as simple as we can, but no simpler. And I forget whose quote that is, but it was from some guy in the past who was like way, way smarter than I am. Construction by its nature is very complex. It's not complicated, but it's complex. So simplicity is key. Your second point was coordinating skills of team members, and I think you alluded to the skills of our team on the construction side, which is absolutely true. And you also, I think, alluded to project management. Now, and I want to, my disclaimer that I don't work in project management, but I like to think that we close the loop between pre-construction and the information, and we help each other out in a very positive way rather than kind of splitting the responsibilities and pointing fingers. So we try to put individuals in the best position for success based on what they're really good at or what they know, their area of expertise. That's also probably why I'm in pre-construction. That's sort of the back of the house, since I don't deal well with the public. But the design disciplines I mentioned earlier, each one of them also has a specific set of skills or knowledge also. And so coordinating their expertise during design should really happen more often than it does currently.
Yeah,
right?
It's a distinct issue. Like I said, my background is almost 30 years in the design world, and that's always been a failing. It's like I was saying, people get thrown. It's like, okay, who's available? Those three guys, okay, they can design that job. They know nothing about that type of work. They know nothing about that type of construction, but they're who's available, so good enough. We'll have somebody review it at the end, and that's a bad approach.
That's right. So you're speaking from experience, and I also think that the design side probably gets a bad rap in our world as contractors because of sort of this recurring or the ongoing challenges with that level of coordination. But there's some pretty brilliant and talented people on the design side. So if you leverage the expertise for what it is that you do well, then all you have to do is the third point or the third ingredient that you had mentioned, which is communication, right? You have to integrate and have smooth communication. That's where I think the tech tools that we have at our disposal can really improve not only the communication, but the actual workflow and the speed.
Yep.
But it all depends on the information we get, how we get it, and how good it is, right? That makes a big difference as far as what we can do with it and what tricks or tools we can use to help us in that communication process.
Right. Yeah, I agree. You can't stress enough. The flow of information back and forth has to be simple and easy and centralized, and that makes all the difference in the world. So Rocco, since you're back there sleeping, let's wake you up and bring you into the conversation here. So from the Zentech standpoint, how often do we actually interact with clients to help them kind of work through constructability and communication issues?
I think I wish I had something more than water on my desk because you guys are using a lot of fancy terms.
No bourbon here. That's not allowed on the podcast.
Why not?
I don't know. I just because I didn't get any, so no one else can have some.
Didn't know about that rule.
Now, I wouldn't say that the term constructability comes up in a lot of our direct discussions, but I think everything that we do around the technology involves constructability, right? I mean, it's with all the tools that we use, the idea is to improve the whole process of constructability. But I'm going to kind of throw a monkey wrench into things at you guys here with a question. I mean, what from the technology and skill set standpoint, what kind of impact does a lack of technology experience cause? What issues does it cause when people don't have a good understanding for the technology?
That's actually a really fair question, right? And it comes down to, like I said earlier, right? It's training, right? And you can take the best designer, the best architect, the best MEP engineer that you have, right? And if he can't take his design and effectively put it onto a piece of paper or a BIM model, and then know how to take that and put it out into a location or a format that Matt and his compatriots can access, all of your brilliance, to my mind, is useless. Right? So you're saying, and you can have the most brilliant doctor in the world, but if he can't teach someone else how to do it, he should not be in a school. You know what I'm saying? And so that's kind of how I look at that. Yeah. Matt, what do you think?
Well, this is a really good question, Rocco. And I was sort of thinking about the communication aspect of it, since that was where we left off with sort of the last riff and the question at hand. But I'll just give you an example. So you have the best architect, engineer, design team, and then you have the best construction team on a project. If everybody decides that email communication is good enough to establish the information workflow and questions and answers and problem solving, maybe the project is not going to go as well as it could if we figured out another way. So, to Rocco's point, technology is relative, right? So someone who doesn't know what they don't know assumes that email, well, that's technology, and that's what I'm going to use to communicate. A lot of times that's not the most effective way. right? I mean, we have hundreds of emails every day. You have to sort through them. You have to organize them into what's an issue that needs to be addressed immediately and what's just a question or a thought that you're going to put in your back pocket and make sure it ends up on your scope sheet. But, that's just a very simple example of technology versus, do you not know what you don't know yet, or what's available to make it better? So that's where I think you guys are strong, and you focus on the people and the process rather than just the tech tool. Anybody can say, hey, here's this tool, but do you know how to use it? Do you know how to use it in the best way? That's how you're going to get the results you're looking for on complex construction projects.
I agree 100%. So, okay. All right. So, like I said at the top of the show, constructability is a really broad topic. And I wanted to cover the overall concepts first. All right. But we're going to take a break to listen to today's sponsor. And when we get back, I want to give Matt a chance to, vent a bit on the specifics of what issues he runs into, particularly in that PDF construction document area, and how he thinks it can best be fixed. So we will be back in just a few minutes after you hear from this with more of the Cattle Call Podcast. All right, Rocco, so we are sponsoring ourselves yet again today. What is it we want to talk about?
We're going to talk about me today, Jim.
No one wants to talk about you. Not even you.
Oh, fine. Let's talk about Zentek Tech Blocks.
Awesome. I like Zentek Tech Blocks. Zentek Tech Blocks are prepaid support hours that let you call on Zentek's experienced technical staff to address all your support questions, problems, help you with workflows and standards, really anything you need on the technology side. We're here to provide the support you need so that your most talented people aren't being dragged into helping everybody else in your company instead of working on the billable jobs that you need them focused on. All right. So Zentek Tech Blocks are available in multiple sizes. We sell them in 5-hour, 10-hour, 20-hour, and 40-hour prepaid support blocks. And if you're interested and you need that sort of help, Rocco, how do they reach out to us?
Yeah, hit up our website, zentekconsultants.net. Give us a ring, 866-824-4459, or even drop us an email, sales@zentekconsultants.net.
All right, Zentek Tech Blocks, the vital support that your people need exactly at the moment that they need it. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Cattle Call Podcast. And we are talking today with Matt DeBasio of Agnes Construction, and we're discussing the limitations of construction document output and how to best address those concerns. Now, I know some of my listeners out there are saying, what is Jim talking about? We all get the same construction info in our PDFs. Now, look, we know some design firms do a better job than others, but I think what Matt's trying to point out here today, and Matt, feel free to correct me if I'm completely wrong, is that there's an endemic flaw in what we've all come to expect and to accept as proper construction documentation. So Matt, tell our listeners where you're coming from in this topic. Where is the industry growing wrong in documentation output and processes related to that are considered kind of common practice?
Well, I think the biggest mistake is that there's no standards for output, right? So an organization like the AIA, for example, as far as I know, they're looking out for almost legal and business interests only rather than work product. Mm-hmm. So that's an organization I would look to first to say, okay, why have they not established standards for design documentation, right? If you're a member of the AIA or if you're a licensed architect, at what point you say, I am agreeing to abide by the standards of the industry. And so what do we mean by standards? Even the simplest things like title blocks or the way in which the text runs on the page. So hint, in your title block, don't have it running sideways up the edge. Or font selection, right? Oh. All of those things can make our lives easier or really quite miserable. The layout of sheet views, right? If you're issuing changes via an addendum or bulletin, don't shift the layout of your sheet views a 1/4 inch in your addendum or bulletin sets, because we automate the change detection, right? And if it moves,
Yeah.
the machine reads the whole sheet as having changed. That is something that can drive us absolutely batty. And for that matter, be sure to cloud changes. That's a great start. And believe it or not, it only happens some of the time. A lot of times
that one boggles my mind.
New documentation, and you guys figure out what changed. And so we can do that, and we can automate it via some technology tools. But, well, if the sheet view shifts by even a hair on the page, then you can't do it.
Yeah.
And so then now we're really frustrated. So maybe we need to make sure that we QA/QC simple things, right? Do the sheets in the set line up with the drawing list, or are some missing or misnumbered, etc.? Right? What about sheet titles? Is there consistency in the nomenclature? Does the info on the sheet reflect the title?
Mm-hmm.
Does your work maybe involve dozens or hundreds of different layers in design? Civil engineers. And if so, what does your output look like if those layers aren't considered and then flattened or processed, etc., when you publish? Right? I've seen some fairly new and higher spec computers really struggle with loading and rendering images from civil sets due to this very fact. We ended up doing the processing ourselves to the PDFs to make them readable to the wider audience, meaning subcontractor bidders who may not have a supercomputer that can handle the performance requirements. And this isn't related to civil drawings, so I don't want to pick on any civil engineers or designers out there. So if you're an architect and you use some funny hatch patterns or something like that, or fills in order to delineate different materials, sometimes those will affect performance of a PDF upon output as well. So pay attention to that stuff.
Yeah.
Now, there are absolutely those out there who realize a lot of these things way before I did. And they've been working pretty tirelessly to actually improve it. So I'm going to take this opportunity to give a shout out to Nathan Wood and the Construction Progress Coalition. That organization has as one of its primary goals to fix this very problem. So I would encourage anybody that's interested in this, whether you're a designer saying, wait a second, am I causing this problem, or am I not adhering to certain standards or doing weird things that people are getting annoyed at? Or if you're a contractor that says, yeah, I've been having those problems too, and I've always wondered, how are we going to fix it? Well, go check out their website, Construction Progress Coalition, and you can even download the standards that they've already come up with and why they've come up with them. So they have a very scientific process as to why they've decided that these should be the standards. Or if you're so inclined, join the group and contribute your own ideas to try to change things for the better.
That's good. What was it? Give the website one more time. I'm not familiar with them.
The organization is called the Construction Progress Coalition.
I have to check that out myself because I am very interested. So that's nice to know. Cool.
Yes.
So very nice.
They've been doing this work for a while. They're the ones that are probably going to solve this problem. So I just wanted to give them their due credit because somebody is actually working on this. They understand it very well, and they are working very hard to fix it.
Excellent. It's a good deal. Okay. So, I think one of the points that I brought up in the first half of today's podcast was the need for, integrating your communication workflows. And I think, a large part of in the construction field, working in the construction field is giving everybody involved in your project the ability to access and mark up and ask and reply to questions on, and, generally just work with these PDF files that we're talking about today. And here at Zentech, right, we generally use Bluebeam Review for PDF control at all levels. And we do quite a lot of work configuring it to each client's specific needs. So, Matt, obviously I know that you are a Bluebeam user yourself. What are your thoughts on a program like this one that touts itself as a necessary component to all construction work? Do you find it to be vital, or do you think you can do without it, or not even just Bluebeam, but without a similar package if you want to use something different?
It is necessary. As a matter of fact, it should be mandated by law.
Ooh. Well, that was a simple yes.
I always say a simple yes would suffice, right? But I always say Bluebeam changed my life for the better. So I think anyone out there listening who maybe uses Adobe or some other PDF program, consider ditching it immediately and learn Bluebeam. It can change your life too. So I've already alluded to some of the tools we use in Bluebeam just from a processing standpoint, right? So the page labeling and setting up hyperlinks for navigability, having your little tool chest for markups. I have my own mise en place for setting up all my info in my digital workspace before I dive into the project, right? The format of the output that we talked about before has a direct effect on that, which is why I think it's so important. If the project itself is difficult, you want to at least make that part easy, right? Yeah. So regarding constructability, Bluebeam Studio can be your very best friend. And I'm sure you guys are familiar with Studio because you are Bluebeam consultants or trainers.
Yeah.
What Bluebeam Studio is, it allows multiple parties to comment and mark up on the same set of documents, plans and specifications. You can turn on and off various things that you want to see or you're concerned with, and it can be set up for navigability. Again, the page labels, hyperlinks, that really help. I think the main thing with Studio sessions is to establish protocols and everyone agree on how to organize the comments and the markup info. Otherwise, you get a very long list of activities with no particular rhyme or reason.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to sort through and organize issues into priority, type, or who's responsible for that issue. And it kind of defeats the idea of that centralized place for constructability review. Yeah. This is something here we continue to work on as we get more comfortable with the Bluebeam Studio platform, but we realized its importance. We realized its benefits and the opportunity to really accelerate review amongst our team, but we also realized that we need to work on sort of that organization of all of the content that we're adding to the session.
Yeah, and I give you a little 2-cent tip that we do with our clients here when we're working with them to set up Studio, Matt. And for all the listeners as well, you can take this back to your company. One of the best things to do with that is to actually just build yourself a simple one-page PDF document that automatically you add it to the top of every session. So at the top of each session in your file list is how to mark up this project. And it just explains, this is the process we want to use. It's right in front of everybody, so if there are any questions, they're answered. So we've actually found that to be a really useful way to kind of avoid the problem you're looking at there. So
that is a great tip. I think it's just a matter of defining that process and then putting it on paper so everybody has it for reference and say, this is what we're going to do. And as we move from project to project, we learn what works and what doesn't, and you can always evolve that document to add or modify things that work or don't work.
Exactly. Right. Everything's a living, breathing document. And this ties into exactly what we're talking about. This is part of the constructability. It's not just the details and what's on the pages, but it's how you communicate it and how do we structure it and how do we develop the project and how do we get consistency. So it is a real big thing. Even with a great package like Bluebeam, it requires some planning and some thought. So
absolutely. Yeah. So I think what you're proposing is almost like a BIM execution plan for a Bluebeam Studio session, right?
Exactly. Just and keep it tight to a one-page setup, right? Do this. Make sure you fill out these 3 fields, and we're good. And then it's consistent on every single job, and it makes it easy for new people coming in to know exactly how you want your comments and responses formatted. So
that's a great tip. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, no worries. So all right, so Rocco. So how big of a deal do we find that Bluebeam is for our construction clients? And what areas do we most often see them looking to configure for their own in-house needs? What are the big areas there?
Oh, Bluebeam is huge. I mean, we have tons of folks that are using it. And, from the sales standpoint, one of the greatest things about the product is that it's hugely affordable. I mean, in comparison to other products out there, and I'm not going to mention any specifically, but I mean, Bluebeam is a couple $100 per license, so it's heavily used and very, very affordable. Configuration standpoint, we do a lot, when it comes to markups and even on a takeoff and estimating, and that's a big part of our business, and the folks love the flexibility that it brings. It's there's a lot of power behind the tool, and we obviously do training and consulting here. But it's not an impossible product to learn on your own if you have the time and can dedicate to it as well.
Right. Yeah, no, it definitely is. So, and like I said, it was funny. I was on you reckon I run a call with some potential client yesterday, and the one thing that I pointed out to him is, that I think the biggest issue people run up to against with a tool like Bluebeam is because it is a very low cost product, right? And it's everywhere. People tend to equate the low cost with low functionality or ease of use. You know what I mean? It's a simple program to use, but it does so much. Just like all the stuff that Matt was talking about earlier, right? That you want to do, set up document sets and file sharing and document comparison and document overlays and layers and estimating, quantity takeoff, custom whatever you need. And that sometimes, like I said, part of this constructability process also has to be making sure that, like we said early on in the first half, people are comfortable with the technology, that they know how to use what they have. So that's a definite point to consider in this whole conversation. So, I guess kind of the big thing to sum up here is kind of the how-to of all of this. I think, we need to see if there's a way to make use of our CAD and BIM-based output, coupled with PDF tools like Bluebeam and others that focus on working in that PDF format, to start to address the constructability issues we've been talking about here today. And I'm going to give Matt the last word on that. I want to get his vibe on what are the most important aspects of this issue and the best ways to address them as an industry. So Matt, I'm going to drop it all on you now. Okay, so no pressure, but sum up for us exactly how do you think we can improve the industry constructability ratio using the technologies that we have at hand, and why do you think those particular steps?
All right, no pressure here. Well, I think I'm just going to sum up kind of the points that we've already touched upon throughout this podcast, and maybe try to drill into some key takeaways and why they're important. So, first, design standards must be established, right? So we know what we're getting information-wise and what we can and can't do with it. That, I believe, will make it easier to plan for the time and effort it's going to take to work on a project, at least from a very basic standpoint, right? The complexity's always going to vary, so that time and effort, but at least it allows us to focus on kind of our core competency, which is, pre-construction, estimating, building, coordination, and not, just working through documentation. The second thing is, as basketball coach might say, work on your crossover. And I stink at basketball, so I have no crossover. But those areas that most often sprout issues in constructability are the cross-discipline, right, between architecture and structure, between systems and structure, and the dissimilar materials as examples from before. You want to get in front of them as early as possible. There's always going to be problems on construction projects. A wise man once told me, if you have to eat a frog, wouldn't you rather do it when it's a tadpole? And that's kind of a gross way of saying, use the tools and technology we have available to fix the biggest problems early before real time and money are at stake in the field, right? And I think the final point to sum up would be to use the technology tools we have available to improve these processes. The review and the back and forth problem solving is always going to be necessary, but how we achieve that can really make a difference in the level of solutions that we're coming up with. And the overall experience, I think, between team members and probably for your clients or the owners of the construction projects as well. A good experience where we are really rolling with tight communication and being respectful of each other's particular areas of expertise and, of course, respectful of each other's time can really make a difference in the level of success on a project.
Okay. I think those are good points. Let me ask you one last thing, though, before we bounce out of here for today. In terms of the standards, In my personal opinion, and I think you agree with me, but I just want to get your vibe here. Do you think that we need to start looking towards industry-wide standards, kind of a common core that everybody's kind of meeting, or do you think that it should be more of a company-based structure? I lean to the industry. I think we need some kind of a solid baseline.
I'm with you. I think there needs to be some sort of basic standard across the industry. I know some of the larger design firms already have their own standards, and some are better than others, but it depends on personal preference. But it shouldn't have to depend on personal preference. Everybody should understand them kind of right out of the box. So you're right, industry-wide standards. And if you think about it, there's lots of similar standards on the tail end, right? So when it comes to delivering as-built information, there are standards that owners establish. We need the information to look like this, otherwise it's not usable for us. Well, that's kind of what I'm saying is, we need to look at how we use the information and then try to establish a standard such that when we receive it, it's more usable and we don't get frustrated with some of the things we mentioned before. You guys are familiar with COBE, right? That acronym,
Yep.
Construction Operations and Building Information Exchange. Well, that's an example of a standard that was established for that very purpose. Information at the end of the job to be turned over to owners of physical buildings and construction projects such that it will be more usable and also so that people can interact with various pieces of that information in the future, right? So things like Internet of Things and, different integrations with equipment in the building or systems. That's what we're really proposing, Jim, you and I, as far as industry-wide standards, but on the front end of this life cycle, right? So from the design phase, that's where we need to establish the standard so that the information is consistent.
Yep.
And that's all we're saying.
And that's a struggle. I mean, as well as I do, right? You deal with designers, they're all very territorial. They're all convinced that their methodology and what they want to show is the best way to do it. So that's an uphill battle, but I agree with you 100%. I think that's where the industry needs to go here. So
yeah, that's why I was recommending starting with the simple things, right? So you start simple and then you kind of work from there.
There you go. That works. All right. So I think that kind of covers our topic for today. And I want to thank the always entertaining Matt DeBasio for being here yet again. And I hope that you'll continue to come back on the show. And next time I'll make sure you get some bourbon. How's that?
Jim Rocco, thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun, as always. And yeah, next time we're gonna bring the bourbon. How about
Outstanding. That? Bourbon all around. All right, Matt. Thanks so much for being here, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt.
All right,
guys.
folks.
Thank you so much.
We're gonna bounce out of here, and we will catch you next time on the Cattle Call Podcast. All right, everybody. Today's Cattle Call was brought to you courtesy of Zentech Consultants. That's Rocco and I. Zentech Consultants works with design and manufacturing firms to help our clients purchase and implement the software that they need in these complex industries. We provide a single point of contact for clients to buy, develop, and learn the most vital software systems for your specific needs. Zentech strives to be your trusted technology partner from your initial needs all the way through long-term support and training for your entire staff. So Rocco, why don't you tell them how to reach out to Zentech?
All right, yeah, you can reach out to us through zentechconsultants.net. You can email us at sales@zentechconsultants.net, or you can even call us 866-824-4459.
Excellent. We look forward to hearing from y'all.